Hey friends, Russell here, coming to you from the shop. Part 2 of short block assembly for the stroker. In the previous episode, which I'll put a link to up here, we checked our bearing clearances, checked our ring gap clearances, and installed our crankshaft. Today, we're going to install the pistons, which means I've got to put the rings onto the pistons, get everything lubed, and get the pistons installed. So I'm going to move the camera right now up close and show you these piston assemblies and how the rings go on. I've already installed 5 of the piston rings sets, and so I'll show you exactly what we do for installing rings on these pistons. So let's talk about these pistons for a second. These are Racetech forged pistons provided to me by Bishop Buell Racing. They use a fully floated pin, which I've already assembled. Standard snap ring to hold the pin in. And then these are scat. Factory 4-liter length, but they're custom scat rods, and the fact that there's no balance pad back here and there's no balance pad up in here, so that the pistons will clear everything nicely. So 5-piece ring set. The oil control ring is a 3-piece ring. And of course the oil control ring is your bottom ring. And the way this goes together, there's that little joint right there. You want the separation, that portion facing up. So you just roll it into the bottom, and then spiral in the top oil control lock. And then the bottom oil control lock. Just spirals right in. And I'll talk about the spacings of where all the gaps should go when I do the install, because that's where you want to do the final check. Thanks, motorcycle. I'll talk about the where the gaps go, the spaces between the rings, when we do the install into the cylinders, because that's when you want to do the final check for it. So the number 2 ring is a compression ring. It has a very slight dimple. I don't know if you can see it. It's got a very slight dimple on it. That indicates that it faces upwards. You have to use a ring expander to put these rings in, these Hastings rings. You just use the expander, open it up, slip it into the second groove. The top compression ring is unidirectional. It doesn't care which way it goes in. And all these notes that I'm talking about is for this specific set of rings. The ring manufacturer will tell you if there's a top ring, a bottom ring, spiral lock, rings, and how they all go together. But for this particular set of rings, all right. So the rings are installed, and I guess I can talk about it right now. Generally, when I'm setting up rings, I will set. So I'm going to use the Scat logo as a reference point. I'm going to find that oil control ring joint that I talked about, and there it is, and I'm going to lay it on the piston pin, and then I'm going to find a lower gap oil control. Where'd it go? There it is. I'm going to set the lower oil control gap about 1 inch away on one side, and the upper one about an inch away on the other side, and it's way over here. So I've got to try and hold the two ring sets together and then move that one over without disturbing what I've already got. And I want it about an inch to the other side, give or take. And then what I'll do is, so for this piston, they are directional. This is the intake side, this is the spark plug side. So I'm gonna set my top ring gap on the spark plug side and my bottom compression ring gap on the intake side, so that they're 180 degrees out. That's how I'm going to set the ring gaps up. The only thing I got left to do now is disassemble the big ends of the rings of the piston rods, clean everything real well, and we'll put the bearings in and start dropping them in. Okay, as you can see, we've already got 4 of the pistons installed. I figured there was no need to show all of them. I'm just going to show you the last 2 we're putting in, which is 3 and 4. We've already got our piston in the ring compressor, and simply slip the piston in. Now, I did wipe the bores with oil and the inside of the ring compressor with oil. I don't like using a ton of oil to put the pistons in, mainly because your compression rings should not hardly ever see oil anyway. That's the oil control ring. Is supposed to wipe the oil from the cylinders before the compression ring gets to it. So I minimize the amount of oil when putting pistons in. So once we've got it set, make sure it's good and square. And in it goes. So I'll set the other piston up here real quick. And let me see. Get the camera set up so you can see me set up a piston. So what I'm doing right now is wiping a film of oil inside the ring compressor. And I'll come over here and I'll check my ring gap placement. So it's a little bit off. Okay. and it's dealer's choice on whether you put the rod bearing in prior to piston install or after it's installed. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate both here. This one, the previous one went in without the bearing. This one's going to go in with the bearing. And it's just a matter of preference. So I'll set the camera back up and we'll drive that one in. And it's in. Alright, now what I got to do is flip the motor over. I'm going to have to lay the bearing in this one, and then we'll drive these two pistons onto the crank and put the bearing caps on. And as you can see, this one's got a bearing in it and this one does not. So I'll set that bearing in. And we'll get a smear of lube plate in there. We'll smear some on the crank journal as well. Oh, I'm sorry, the rod journals. So, a lot of different ways you can do this. You can turn it sideways. For the sake of filming, I'm going to do this while it's upside down. So what I'm going to do is hold that rod in line and then come up from the bottom and tap the piston home. And then I'll do the same for the other one. Alright, both pistons are fully registered onto the crank. Now I've got to put the bearing end caps on, and these rods from Scat are serial numbered, so the end caps are etched. For example, this one is Delta 050. And so I've got to match that with the corresponding rod. And of course, don't forget to put the bearing in. So always follow your manufacturer's spec when installing these, on whether they get a lube or don't get a lube. Delta 050, so this one goes there. So what I'm going to do and always follow your rod installer's spec on how to put these together. These particular rods have a register key, so they have to be registered before you torque the bolts down. And these are using ARP fasteners, which uses a moly lube both on the threads and under the bolt head. Wipe down the other bearing cap. Put our bearing shell in. Get some moly lube on it. Little peanut butter. At least that's what we used to call it in the Army, lubriplate. We use the same stuff in aircraft. Matter of fact, I think this is the first time I've actually had to buy it. I've always had surplus available. Almost forgot my molly. And now to torque them down. Always follow your manufacturer's torque specs. If you're using stock rods, stock bolts, stock nuts, whatever the Jeep, AMC, Chrysler spec for it. These are ARP fasteners with the scat rods. They're spec'ing 45 foot-pounds in 2 steps. So the first step is about 20 to 23 foot-pounds. Crank it up from there. So, like I said, 45 foot-pounds. We've already got them. All the rest of them are already torqued halfway, so now we're going to finish torquing them. 45 foot-pounds, 45 times 12 is 540 inch-pounds. So we'll crank this up to our inch-pound scale. That's 540. So. I'm going to turn the crank till 2 more are standing straight up. All right, all the rod ends are torqued. I'm gonna go grab the crank girdle and test fit it. Sometimes the girdle will fit on a 258 crank without spacers. Sometimes you have to have the spacers. So I'm gonna test fit it real quick to see what our clearances look like. Nope, we're gonna have to have the spacers. All right, answers that question. So, we got the spacers on, got our girdle nuts. We'll put these on and torque them down and double check the crank clearances. And we'll wrap this up for today. Alright, so girdle's installed, nuts are installed, and it is to be torqued to 35 foot-pounds, which is 420 inch-pounds. And there's a torque sequence. Now we test spin it. All right, that's all we got for today. And that's what I wanted to get done today. Finish with the short block, obviously minus the camshafts. But we've got the pistons and rings installed on the pistons installed, torqued down, and the crank girdle on. Double check my spacing between the crank and the girdle, because this is a 12 counterweight pre-81 258 258 crank, 4.2 liter crank. So had to use the crank spacers, got everything torqued down, it's good to go. That's it for today. Next video we'll get the camshaft and related ancillary components installed, flip it over, get the head on, and finish this short block assembly. If you like this content, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, hit that bell icon for future notifications, and as always, there's more to follow.